Praise be, Jesus and Mary. Today on the show, we have Elizabeth Yore, who has a lot to say about the problems in the church, especially for the push of a synodal church. We discuss many subjects, such as the apostasy in the church, the homosexual agenda, and much more, which also touch upon the warnings of Our Lady of Fatima. You'll want to stay tuned to the end for this one. Welcome back to Fatima Today. I'm Monique Krowecki, and today we have a special guest with us, Elizabeth Yore. Liz is a good friend of the Fatima Center and has spoken at many of our conferences, and we're very happy to have her with us today. Hi, Liz. How are you?
Hi, Monique. Thank you so much. I am an ardent admirer of the Fatima Center and the important work you do on behalf of Holy Mother Church and also for the world. So thank you for the invitation.
Thank you, and thank you for accepting the invitation because you are a wealth of information, and I think that our viewers are really going to like to hear what you have to say. And for those who do not know Elizabeth Yore, she's a graduate of Georgetown University and Loyola Law School and is an international child advocate attorney specializing in the investigation of exploited and missing children. She is the founder of Your Children, which is dedicated to the protection and advocacy of children around the world. She appears as a regular on The War Room with Steve Bannon and has also appeared on Faith and Reason with John Henry Weston from LifeSite News. She's also written for many different periodicals, including Breitbart, Town Hall, The Daily Wire, and LifeSite News. So we are very happy that she is here with us today, and welcome to Fatima Today, Liz.
Thank you, Monique. I'm delighted to be here and really looking forward to talking about one of my most favorite subjects, both children and the Fatima Center and the Fatima message.
Thank you so much. So now we know that your work is focused on child abduction and exploitation and the defense of children. But one of our viewers was concerned with Catholic schools insisting that every child must be vaccinated as a requirement to attend school, even though some vaccines are either derived from fetal tissue in their development, production, and or testing, and they're very concerned that these go against their pro-life views. Is there any way that parents can protect their children from having to take these vaccines or any vaccine that goes against a parent's right to make medical decisions for their own children, especially in accordance with their Catholic pro-life beliefs?
Well, I feel very strongly, since we all went through the COVID disaster, the mandatory vax requirements for many businesses, for schools, for universities, and really the Catholics were leading the charge against these quote-unquote vaccines, injections, because of their origination with aborted fetal cells. And what I would encourage people to do and parents to do is to dig their heels in, become as educated as possible about these vaccines. Now we know we have peer-reviewed studies showing the long-term effects, as long-term, 4 or 5 years, not only on children, but on young people and on adults. They're staggering results. I would recommend a couple of things. There's a very important study out of Norway. Both Dr. Peter McCullough and Dr. William Makis both have talked about the physical damage by the vaccines. Naomi Wolf, in her Daily Clout website, has described in what is called the Pfizer papers all the known harm that came from the vaccines that were hidden from the public. We know that they did not undergo long-term studies or research. Going forward, now we're really looking with Bobby Kennedy and his work at HHS, the impact of and use of vaccines on children. So parents need to become educated. And, just like I tell parents, it's it's quite frankly quite easy not only to be a lawyer, even though you don't have a law degree, but also a doctor. You can read these studies and you can become well versed. In fact, it was, Naomi who really did all the hard work of going through and plowing through all these emails and studies. So it's important for parents to be totally educated, but most importantly, to be real advocates for their children. And that means not taking, a rejection for an answer. Keep fighting, keep appealing, build a group of parents to support your efforts, so that there is a growing, really pushback of a group of parents that have become more knowledgeable than the school officials in the impact of these vaccines. It may not be vaccines next time, it may be something else, but it's, parents are the last line of defense for their children. And so it's, obviously it's a heavy burden. So now I have to learn about vaccines. Now I have to research these things. Now I have to go to school board meetings. Now I have to, write letters and petition my bishop and petition, the Catholic school superintendent. Yes, because now we know the tragedies that have come from these vaccines. So that would be my recommendation. We're in this day and age, we all have to become activists, and parents are the most important activists for their children.
That's very true. Very true. And a lot of people had to pull their kids out of school and homeschool them because it was the only way that they could protect them. But definitely, if you can get more parents together, I think that is very important. And be knowledgeable, like you said. So now this whole vaccine issue touches on, and I know we're going back, quite a few years, but when Pope Francis was alive, he mandated COVID vaccines for bishops and priests and parishes, and I think the staff as well.
Mhm.
Now, having the Vicar of Christ promote these shots sometimes made it difficult for Catholics to even argue for a religious exemption.
Yeah.
And so here you have your religious leader, going against your own pro-life beliefs and saying this. And a lot of people were upset because the churches were closed down. They couldn't receive the sacraments. Yet it seemed as if the church was more concerned with the safety of the body than the salvation of the souls of everyone. So what are your thoughts about Pope Francis focusing on the COVID shots rather than keeping the churches open?
Well, we were being besieged from all sides, weren't we?
Mm-hmm.
And at a time when we really needed the grace from the sacraments, and we're being denied. And now we know it was just a total and complete scam. And the damage done to our priests. I know many priests that were spending, full time being tested, battling their bishops. And it was just an outrage. And having, the Pope deny the right to religious freedom to all of the Catholics around the world, and to and look, he was doing the bidding of the World Health Organization. He was doing the bidding of, the World Economic Forum. And so as a result, we didn't have the Catholic Church as a model to stand up for the rest of the world, that we should keep the churches open. We had liquor stores open, we had drug dispensaries open, we had Walmart open, food stores open, but not churches. So it was a total and complete boondoggle, outrage. The church has not recovered from it. Most of us, if not all of us, found cyber masses very, very unhelpful.
Yeah.
And yet a lot of people, as a result of that edict that came down, stopped going to mass, and the masses have not recovered. So books history will be written about this time. I think of that one picture, Pope Francis in the darkened St. Peter's Square, sitting there all by himself with the lights on, and how he had abandoned his flock, and no mention about the origination from aborted fetal cells. It was just such an outrage, and so so unnecessary, and really one of those moments where you could say, here's a moment of opportunity for the Catholic Church to lead the world out of this apostasy, out of this hoax, and to reassure them that the immunity that all of us were given but at birth, and the bodies and spirits that are God breathed into us, we're going to be able to fight this disease or whatever it was, and we lost it. So I'll never forget it. And I think when we get through finally getting to the bottom of this, kind of coordinated, not kind of, it was a coordinated shutdown of the world with the Catholic Church at the head. And when the Pope goes along with this, it really does make it impossible for other churches, congregations to fight back.
That's very true. That's very true. And I just want to mention, though, that the traditional Latin Mass churches, they seem to be the ones that really made extra effort to try to get the sacraments to the people, whether it was keeping their churches open or even just working within the rules, but working so hard 7 days a week to try to get the sacraments to people. I know I go to a traditional Latin Mass, and the priest there, we were only allowed to have 10 people in the churches. And so they would, every half hour, bring in 10 people, hear their confessions, give them communion, and then the next group of 10 people would come in, and they did that all week long, and then when we were able to go outside, we had outdoor masses. And what you were saying about Pope Francis abandoning the flock, that was a comment that somebody actually made that was new to our church, who came during COVID, and he said, now I know where the true shepherds are, which was very interesting.
Yeah, right.
Very interesting statement. But out of that, I was wondering if Pope Francis, part of the reason he issued Traditionis Custodes was perhaps because he couldn't rein in the traditional masses the way he was able to rein in the other ones. I'm not sure. I mean, the only reason I had that thought is because Diane Montagna released the results of a survey that the Vatican has sent out to bishops, asking their basically their attitude towards the traditional Latin Mass in their parishes. And Pope Francis said he was very concerned by the results and felt that he needed to act and close down these masses. But when Diane found the results, she actually found that the majority of bishops were in favor of the traditional Latin Mass. So I think that was a little bit of subterfuge that was done by the Vatican to get the results.
You're being kind, because Traditionis Custodes was a fraud on the church. It was based on a lie. And because he did point to the survey to say, oh, well, we're going to have to suppress the Latin Mass. I think it may or may not have been, I think there was some part of it that was related to the traditional Catholics who fought not only the COVID vaccine, but in the shutdown. But I think it's much deeper than that. I think what it demonstrated was that this new synodal church, which is going to have a new liturgy, which is going to continue to innovate not only theology but liturgy, could not allow the traditional Catholic Mass to stand, that it had to be suppressed because the Latin Mass can't be innovated. And the synodal church is going, as we pray, as we practice, as we pray. And so the Latin Mass was in his sights from the moment he became Pope. He knew that it was going to be a heavy lift, but he was, willing to do it. It continues to this day, and what infuriates me, I mean, a lot of things about this is that they know that the future of the Catholic Church, the young people, are flocking to the Latin Mass. And yet they're shutting it down, suppressing it left and right in the United States. And, people got to start fighting. You cannot take this standing down or be, this is an outrage. This is denying the faith of, 2,000 years, the legacy of our ancestors and martyrs. It was based on a lie. And the majority of bishops, apparently at the time around the world, weren't concerned about its impact on the unity of church. And in fact, that both the Novus Ordo as well as the traditional Latin Mass were both existing together quite nicely, and there was a unity in frankly both masses. So we're going to see more of this. I mean, I don't know what he's going to do in the future, but I know what happened in Charlotte, and I know what happened in Detroit, and it is time to dig in our heels. This is because when you look at somebody like Charlie Kirk, who brought the truth of Christianity to young people, unvarnished, the beauty of the truth, they responded accordingly.
Right.
And yet the Catholic Church, at a time when the young people are looking for beauty, truth, transcendence, which they find in the Latin Mass, the Vatican, the Pope, is denying them the very liturgy that is feeding their souls. What is wrong with us that we aren't in an uproar over this? And using the Catholic imagination to continue flourishing the Latin Mass around America, and having American traditional Catholics lead the way for the world, whether it's going underground like the faithful Catholic Church in China,
Right.
whatever needs to be done to keep it alive, to keep feeding the souls of our young people and the burgeoning Catholic families. But instead, just accepting that he's going, that Bishop Martin is going to banish everybody, 2 hours away to a rural, once Protestant church in farmland. That's your Catholic Mass. It is such an outrage. And, and it becomes for me, becomes very clear when you see, somebody like Charlie Kirk and how his bold witness resonated with young people. And you see, the silence from the USCCB, who hasn't been able to utter a word about Charlie's assassination. Frankly, the silence from the Vatican. There's no formal statement regarding, apparently Leo whispered or commented to Brian Birch, the new Vatican ambassador, about Charlie's assassination. The young people are being abandoned by the Catholic Church. And as we know, when there is a vacuum, evil will fill the void. And on the other side of what happened to Charlie, we see that the void is being filled. And so, I mean, I don't know what it's going to take. Everybody seems to be, crossing their fingers and hoping for the best instead of demanding the best. And so that's kind of my rant on the Latin Mass and, the impact it's had on the church. And I would say that the Latin Mass priests who really carried on throughout COVID used the Catholic imagination, right? With the parking lot masses,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And quietly did their thing. With, some bishops looking the other way. A few bishops looking the other way. But, it is time for people to step up and stop just, hoping and waiting. And then when the hammer falls, they're left without any resources.
Well, I think you've answered a few questions that I was going to have for you, because I was going to ask you if you thought that Pope Leo XIV will reverse Traditionis Custodes and reinstate good Orthodox Catholics, including Bishop Strickland and even Father Frank Pavoni. I guess you can't call him father now, but really, he was a priest from Human Life International. I guess a lot of people, when they call into the Fatima Center, they will ask us, do you think this is going to be the Pope, that will do the consecration? And of course, we're always hopeful that we're going to have that. But I always just tell them we have to wait and see the fruits. Well, I think, based on our conversation, it doesn't seem as if Pope Leo is going to do anything about, the bishop in Charlotte or the bishop in Detroit, and stop them. I know a lot of people were saying, why don't we just ask the Pope to reverse these bishops' decisions? But I don't think that that's going to happen. What do you think?
I don't think so either. Isn't that the new synodal way to decentralize the decision making and give it to bishops? So you have the German church doing its crazy wild thing, and these are two bishops, I believe, that were appointed while Prevost was head of the dicastery for the bishops. And look, he's the Pope. He's an American Pope. He knows what's going on. Pick up the phone and tell Bishop Martin, reinstate the Mass. What are you doing? Weisenberger, in Detroit, the Latin Mass was thriving. All he has to do is pick up the phone. Why wait? Right? Give him. I don't understand this. Well, give him time. You are the Pope on day one. You wear white, within moments of being elected by the conclave. You don't get, this period of reflection. Obviously, all bishops think about these issues, most especially somebody who is, a cardinal and the head of that dicastery. I'm not buying it. And I'm not buying that he hasn't done anything with the China agreement. As a matter of fact, he has doubled down even worse in the China agreement. I was part of an organization that was Repeal the Deal. And I would encourage people to look at that website, repealthedeal.org. And we were demanding that not only the new Pope, whoever he may be, assent to the fact that the deal this horrible, god-awful agreement with the nihilistic, atheistic CCP that allowed them to help appoint bishops. And, oh, by the way, do appoint bishops. Now, Pope Leo is allowing them to redraw the lines within the diocese, creating new dioceses in alignment with the political motives of the Chinese party, Communist Party. I mean, that apparently wasn't part of the deal, and suppressing dioceses that were created by Pope Pius XII. And I remind people, Pope Pius XII was very well aware of the Communist Party under Mao creating the Catholic Patriotic Church, which was an alternative, a parallel church to the Catholic Church. And Pope Pius XII, this was before the internet. This was,
right.
These popes had their finger on the pulse of what was going on, much better than what they do even now. And he said, the Catholic Patriotic Church, which Francis himself said that all these bishops and priests could join, is a tool of an atheistic communist party. And stated that anybody who joined it would and should be excommunicated.
Okay.
And so what people don't know is there are many, many bishops in China who refuse to this day to join the Patriotic Church. As a result, they've been arrested, detained, tortured, sent out to pasture, disappeared. Many priests have been arrested because they refused to sign a loyalty oath to the Catholic Patriotic Church, Catholic Patriotic Church. And what's happening now in the Catholic Patriotic Churches, crucifixes are coming down and they're being replaced by pictures of Xi Jinping, the president, the chairman of the CCP. The Bible is being written so that it reflects communist principles. A new law was passed in China prohibiting any child under the age of 18 to enter a church, to attend religious services, to even attend a religious, summer camp. And this is all done during this, since 2018, when the deal was signed by Francis. All these things have happened. Human rights organizations, China Aid, Open Doors, all these NGOs have said that this agreement with the Vatican has been a disaster, and it has caused an uptick of not only persecution against Catholic churches, but they are bulldozing Christian churches left and right in China. There has been absolute silence from the Vatican about all these arrested priests. So I don't give him any sway or time, to reflect on these issues, because as, time progresses, more and more persecution is happening in China. More and more persecution is happening against traditional Latin mass goers, not only in America, but around the world. I mean, the church is imploding. Her faithful Catholics are suffering, and people are saying, well, give them time. Give them time. You're either the Pope or you're not.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's my 2 cents on, 2 issues that I think are absolutely require his urgent attention.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. And, we do see that kind of style coming to the West. I mean, definitely the West is becoming more communist. Sister Lucy said that Our Lady said the whole world will become communist. Yes. I live in Canada. When Prime Minister Trudeau was in power, it's before Carney, although they're pretty much the same. But when Trudeau was in power, he basically said that people could not get any grants for summer camps or anything unless they declared that they were pro-choice. That was a requirement before they could get any money. Yes. Wow. Yeah. So you can see that it's starting to go the same way. And of course, we've had a lot of churches burned down here. It seems to be open season everywhere on Catholics. It's the one group that you can, criticize with impunity and have no consequences whatsoever. And I look at Charlie Kirk, you speak about Charlie Kirk speaking truth, and he was a strong defender for marriage and the family, and Our Lady of Fatima said that the final battle would be over marriage and the family. Right.
Yeah. And, like nothing else, martyrdom brings clarity and it illuminates the truth. It emboldens the spirit, kind of resets the moral order. And, only in America can a 18-year-old teenager with a Christian message, a love of Christ, an angst for a reordering of the American spirit, transform a culture that has really gone awry. And with fearlessness, goodwill, a happy warrior spirit, Charlie Kirk really emboldened on it was a political utopia. And he only had a microphone and a folding chair. That's it. Yeah. And he actually died as he lived with a microphone in his hand, sitting on a folding chair, entertaining questions from his fellow generation members. Many of these kids born out of confusion, hate, even malice. And this is what, the bishops need to understand. With merely his voice of reason and faith and truth, he transformed a generation who were hurtling into nihilism. He rescued them from the brink of destruction. And he recognized, as I wish the bishops would recognize, that his generation was hungry for the truth, the unvarnished truth. And this was a generation seeking solace and meaning in their lives. And, he really stopped them in his tracks with his message of the love for Jesus Christ as our Savior. And then a few days later, after Charlie's assassination, we go to the See of St. Peter in the Vatican, and we watch a Disney production of techno drones, laser light display on the facade of St. Peter by the diabolical Disney Corporation. But what dazzles the soul and inspires conversion is not an AI inspired techno show. No matter what dazzles millions of people around the world is a brave young man going into the belly of the beast, the den of iniquity, actually the den of lions, the universities and academia,
Yeah.
and speaking the truth. And so, like Catholic martyrs, his testimony and witness got him killed. And like martyrs, his death will inspire many and draw many to the love of Christ. But the Catholic hierarchy, from the Pope on down, embraced the glitz of modernism,
Right.
both in word and display. They mistakenly believe that the youth of the world want a techno light show with rap singers, when the youth have repeatedly said they seek the light of truth and the light of the candles burning at a traditional Latin Mass. Yet the Vatican gives them rap stars, Hollywood celebrities, and watered down pablums. So I thought the difference was very stark,
Yes.
and I just, they're just not reading the tea leaves at all. I mean, they're just missing the boat.
Yeah, definitely. And Our Lady did speak of that. She warned of that. She said, if my requests weren't heeded, the good would be martyred. That's one of the warnings that she gave. And so then we see, Charlie Kirk standing up for the truth, and he gets shot. Also, we see that the FBI was starting to investigate traditional Latin Mass parishes. Why would they start doing that? Are they worried that there's truth there, or are they working with the deep state and the deep church, as I've heard some people suggest before? Will we be seeing more martyrdom in the future?
Well, that's a great question, Monique, because, if they weren't busy infiltrating traditional Latin masses, looking for radical traditional extremists,
Yeah.
terrorists, that's what they called people, perhaps they would have found, the Minnesota shooter who, shot, children like fish in a barrel while they were at Mass. Had they infiltrated the radical trans violent agenda network around the country. And we've seen, how many mass murders as a result of these people. But no, instead, they decided to focus all their energy on traditional Latin mass goers. And, frankly, I kind of agree with you. I think this was a coordinated effort with the deep state. I think this was a deep state operation, to much like the J6 catastrophe.
Okay.
And we don't have the answers about the FBI Latin Mass investigation. We do not know how extensive it was. We know that we were lied to by Chris Wray, the former head of the FBI, that said it was a single product from one local, Richmond office of the Richmond product. But what we found was that it was extensively sent throughout the country, that there were a number of investigations by other FBI offices into traditional Latin masses, that they had infiltrated Latin masses. And, my question is that, number one, we haven't seen, this has been covered up. We need to have more answers. Who initiated this? Were there individuals in the hierarchy of the Catholic Church and in the Vatican that were directing this investigation? Based on the records that released, there were dozens of Catholic organizations that were infiltrated, and that this was just the beginning. And except for, I think it was Kyle Serafin, the whistleblower, we would never have known that this was going on and would be exposed. And frankly, I have some friends who were part of Latin Mass communities in 1996, where the FBI was involved in infiltrating. So I think this has really been going on for a long time. I think it was ramped up. Again, it's these missed opportunities to go after dangerous criminals who are revolutionaries, anarchists who are trying to turn over our country. I mean, anybody who goes to a Latin Mass knows that these are the finest citizens, peace-loving, family-oriented people. It's absurd. But, it came, right on the heels of Traditionis Custodes. And my initial reaction, Monique, was, oh, these are the FBI's, the shock troops for the Vatican to further, try and trump up charges against Latin Mass goers. And frankly, I'm insistent that we get to the bottom of it. And we really need the people who love the Fatima Center, love the Latin Mass, to continue to demand answers from the FBI. Nobody has paid the price. Nobody's been arrested. Yeah. And we have no idea if this came at the direction or coordination or cooperation of the hierarchy in the United States and in the Vatican. And to me, knowing how much the Vatican was coordinating with the Hillary Clinton campaign and with the Biden administration and with McCarrick, it was not far-fetched to believe that this was a coordinated effort to really further suppress the Latin Mass goers and paint them once and for all as radical extremist terrorists. That's the language that was used by the FBI.
Yeah, what a shame. What a shame that they're being defined that way. There was a real contrast in the last few weeks, or maybe a month, I guess, because you had the Society of St. Pius X Jubilee pilgrimage to the Vatican. And then shortly after that, you had the LGBTQ pilgrimage to the Vatican. And so two very different pilgrimages. And yet, you have Pope Leo going out and welcoming James Martin to I don't know if he was back at the Vatican yet or if he was still in Castel Gandolfo, but he had a meeting with James Martin. It was at the Vatican? Okay, thank you. So he met with him, and as far as I know, I didn't hear any reports of him, reprimanding him on some of his stances that go against church teaching. He seems to be welcoming that. And of course, we've heard about Julia Maloney's book, on the St. Gallen Mafia. And there seems to be a real acceptance of the homosexual lifestyle. And I'm not saying that you don't love the sinner, hate the sin, and that you don't try to help people, convert and come to be in the state of grace with Jesus. It just seems that they're giving a pass to all of this in the name of being welcoming. And I know that in 2 Thessalonians, it says, unless there come a revolt first, right? So we're talking about the apostasy, and we know for sure that in the third secret, because we have a quote from Cardinal Chappie, who was a papal theologian to many popes, and he said that in the third secret of Fatima is mentioned that the apostasy in the church will start from the top. Okay, right. So this is really serious. Everything that's going on when you're talking about changing the liturgy even further, the Synodal Church, the acceptance of homosexuality, making it seem like that is not against church teaching anymore, and just the whole idea that Catholics are not just falling away from the faith themselves in the silent apostasy, as Pope John Paul II called it, But it actually appears like the churchmen themselves, starting at the top, are leading Catholics away from the true faith. They're certainly not being taught catechism. I wasn't taught catechism in school, proper catechism, so Catholics don't know their faith. So my question for you, since everything seems to be getting so worse, do you think that if the church degenerates further into this synodal church, into this church of anything goes, that the majority of practicing Catholics will go along with it, or do you think there'll be some pushback?
Well, that's a big question. A couple things. We know 7% of Catholics attend Sunday Mass. So the majority of Catholics aren't practicing the faith at the moment, for whatever reasons. I'd like to discuss something that's going on in the Vatican. We all know the absolute tragedy by the violent transgender murderer who shot up the all-school mass in Minnesota. And 4 days later, Pope Leo meets with James Martin, who is extolling, the LGBT trans agenda in the church. And to me, it was just like a knife in the heart of the parents whose children were killed, and the 18 people who were some maimed, some still in the hospital because of this madman. And when you read his manifesto, it's online, and I would encourage people to read it. It's chilling, but it talks about, first of all, he talks about how he doesn't want to be trans anymore. But of course, in Minnesota, you have no way out because there's no therapist. It's against the law to provide reconversion back to heterosexual lifestyle. It's against the law in Minnesota. He talks about this demonic descent, the diabolical that was consuming him. And so we can't have a discussion about that, can we? No, we can't demonize the shooter. And yet we can elevate Father Martin, who gets a private 30-minute meeting with Pope Leo right after this absolute disaster that happened in Minnesota. And, what people need to remember is not so much the words as the pictures and the gestures. Because when the LGBT pilgrimage occurred, that was inspired by, Martin and his organization, what did all the newspapers and websites around the world carry? Pictures of the two men holding hands in St. Peter's with F the rules in the back of his t-shirt. What else did they show? They showed the blasphemous carrying in of a rainbow cross into St. Peter's, walking across the bones of the martyr St. Peter, the first pope. I mean, and so the message that comes from the Vatican, without using any words, to the world is, this is okay, we approve of this. And, remember, I have not forgotten that transgender activist in New York who was given a, funeral service, it wasn't a mass, in St. Patrick's Cathedral.
Oh, yeah.
In the vile, blasphemous singing. His name had been changed to Cecilia Gentili. Singing Ave Maria, instead saying Ave Cecilia, calling her a holy whore. The dresses, the costumes, the obscene costumes that were worn to that funeral service inside that church. I mean, this is a political ideology with the goal to set out to destroy the teaching of the Catholic Church, the beliefs of the Catholic Church, the practice of the Catholic Church. It is not a human rights organization. If you read the history of the LGBT QIA movement. It is a political ideology based on getting in people's face, forcing confrontation, changing the institution. And what is the last institution that needs to be changed? Is the Catholic Church, which has stood for thousands of years, that homosexuality is a disordered orientation, and that is against God's law. But we are well past that. Those words haven't been uttered out of the Vatican for decades. And what I think now is reflected, and you mentioned this, is the homosexual infiltration into the College of Cardinals, into the bishops, into the seminaries, that through McCarrick, through Bella Dodd, the recruitment, the grooming of young boys, bringing them into the seminary, and that being protected. And let's be honest, the John Jay study about the cause of the clergy abuse scandal found that 81% of the victims were male, which means this was a homosexual predation on young boys, some teenagers, some younger, the vast majority. But no, we can't have that discussion. But that is a fact. And until we purify the church, until we have a discussion about the vile ideology and its impact not only on children but on the family of LGBT agenda, that this is a radical ideology driven by the devil, fostered by the UN and all the quote-unquote human rights organizations, it's going to continue to flourish, and it's going to continue to take its victims, like all the children, in that at that mass will be traumatized for the rest of their lives, to say nothing of those that were injured and those that were killed. The whole country was traumatized by what occurred with watching Charlie Kirk die. It's just, we've got to stop being afraid. And Charlie wasn't afraid. But the Catholic Church has not, purified itself.
No.
Pope Francis elevated, protected clergy, bishops, cardinals who had preyed on young people, who had covered up bad priests. And so, that's, as far as I'm concerned, the legacy of Pope Francis. And he was never held to account. One document that was given to Pope Francis by Benedict was what they called I think it was a 2-volume red dossier, the dossier, which detailed all the infiltration of homosexuality and predation, all the infiltration of Masonry, Freemasonry in the Vatican, operating in the Vatican. And it went into a drawer and has never been seen again. One of the things was like, release the details of the China agreement, release the details of the Red Dossier, an investigation that was conducted by one bishop, 2 cardinals, trusted men that were unimpeachable as far as Benedict was concerned. We as Catholics must demand that our church is purified. They're not going to clean it up from within. They're just not going to do it. The good news is that money has been, the spigot has been turned off. Hopefully, it hasn't been turned on with Leo. That obviously was the goal. They came out almost immediately and said that was the goal of choosing an American for Pope. That the money from the American Catholic billionaires and millionaires would start flowing again. But look, I think there's this book by Frederick Martel that came out just a few years ago called In the Closet. And it talks about that he uses pseudonyms, but all based on fact about what's going on in the Vatican. I challenge anybody to get through that book. I mean, I couldn't. I got halfway through and had to put it down. It is infuriating. And, it pollutes theology, it pollutes the belief in the Catholic Church, it destroys lives, children, it makes a mockery of Christ's church. I mean, the Blessed Mother warned us that this was going to happen. Who is going to pick up the mantle and march to purify the bride of Christ? This is the spotless bride of Christ. This is what we were taught, Monique.
Yeah.
And it's being just absolutely defamed and blasphemed by that Jubilee March. And in this crazy laser light show of drones. I mean, just don't insult my intelligence anymore, my faith, that I would be lured into thinking, that what the new synodal church is a drone show, laser show. I mean, come on. But anyway, that's the question about homosexuality. We never got to the bottom of McCarrick. We don't know the extent of his influence, his money laundering, his blackmail, we have no idea. And we should be demanding that. We should demand all the records of McCarrick be released, all the records of the predation against young men. So anyway, that's, I feel very strongly about this, and I've just seen the church continue to shrink as a result of millions and millions of people have left the church because of the homosexual predation scandal. Millions.
Yeah. Yeah, I even had read a comment from someone, I can't verify it, but somebody had said that Charlie Kirk did not fully convert to the Catholic Church because of the Marxist leanings of Pope Francis. That's what he said. So, obviously there's a problem there, but we have known about the infiltration in the church for a long time, from communists and Freemasons. In fact, I interviewed Father Murr, where he explained Cardinal Gagnon's investigation of Freemasonry.
That report should be released.
Yes.
That report should be released.
Yes.
Because we know the Freemasons want to destroy the Catholic Church. That is their end goal. Where is the Gagnon report? Where is the dossier? Where is the China agreement? Where are the McCarrick files? We, our hard-earned money, especially the American Catholic Church, has supported the Vatican for all these years, decades. We have a right to ask and demand for these documents.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you're telling me all of these links, and for one thing, I didn't realize that it was so close in time between that school shooting when Pope Francis met with James Martin. So, that really kind of hit home to me. But it really is, the apostasy in the church, but it's worse. It almost seems worse than apostasy, because it's not even a falling away from the faith and stopping there. It's falling away from the faith and embracing the demonic. I mean, David gave a great show with this whole shooter, with the transgender shooter, talking about demonic possession. I think it's more than just a falling away from the faith. It's embracing the evil. It's terrible, the things that we're seeing.
It is, and I really want to urge the Catholics watching this. When Leo came out on the loggia, he said he was going to continue the Synodal Church of Francis. The Synodal Church is the name of the New World Order Church. If you will look at the final, speeches and documents of Francis in the last 5 years, he excised the word Catholic. Catholic is not anywhere seen. In fact, up in Canada, when he went to Canada for that trip, the only time he used the word Catholic was to condemn the Catholic Church. And now, for the, the mass graves, which we now know was a fraud. That was the only time. Otherwise, it was the church. And now you will see more and more the Synodal Church is the New World Order Church. that will unify all religions, that will collapse the dogma of the Catholic Church, that will create a new quote unquote liturgy. That's why they had to get rid of the Latin Mass, because that cannot be innovated. And so when you hear the word synodal, I always write it SINO, synodal. Um, it is the language code for the radical, what I consider to be the new Freemason religion. And I am, I've studied the speeches and the documents, and I am convinced, quite frankly, in the midst of all this, to talk about an inclusive and diverse church is suggesting that the LGBT agenda be brought into the Catholic Church. Do you think they're going to allow, sitting in the pews, a priest to rail about homosexuality? Do you think that's going to be permitted?
No.
And so when they say, a big tent, inclusivity, they are talking about the demonic trans ideology that they want to have embraced in the Catholic Church. And so be very careful. We have to discern when we listen to the language that they use. There is code language in there. And the Synodal Church is, for me, that's the red flag to end all red. That's the red flag that they're, literally carrying Catholic Church into Masonic communist China. So people have to not only discern the images that are coming from the Vatican, but also the language. Read the documents. And they they really sound like, New Age pablum. I'm just shocked. I'm like, people have got to read this. There's nothing but fluff in here. Listening and journeying, and those language, dialoguing. Those words are not in the Bible. There's nothing in there. It's like you're reading Marianne Williamson or Gupta. What's his name? Gupta or Gandhi. It's just fluff.
Yeah.
And it's to lure us into an emotional kind of religion where we accept all, make no judgment. Who am I to judge, said Francis. Who am I to judge? And so if he can't judge, then none of us can judge, right?
Yeah, no, that's interesting. And what you said about Freemasonry trying to destroy the church, it was interesting because Father Moore has actually said, when he was talking about Freemasonry in the Vatican, he said they don't want to destroy the structure of the church. They just want to destroy the faith, but they want to use the structure of the church to promote this new world religion. And it was interesting because I was actually at a Marian retreat last summer, and the priest was talking about the apocalypse, because Pope John Paul II and Sister Lucy both said, look to chapters 8 to 13 of the apocalypse.
Yeah.
And I believe it's in chapter 13 where they talk about the dragon and the beast of the land and the beast of the sea. And this priest said, the beast of the land is the world political power, and the beast of the sea is the world religious power that looks like a lamb but speaks like a dragon. So it could be describing this counterfeit church that the Freemasons are trying to impose within the Catholic Church. And this is where the problem comes in, Liz, because we know at the Fatima Center that the Pope doing the consecration, as Our Lady asked, is the solution that Our Lady gave us to bring about world peace for the conversion of Russia. But how do we get a Pope who is basically following, it seems like, a Freemasonic ideal? I mean, in the Alta Vendita document, it talks about having a Pope that thinks he's Catholic but spouts Freemasonic ideas. But we need the Pope. We need the Pope to do that consecration and order all the bishops to do it with him. And the thing is that the Pope is under this idea of collegiality. He's just one of many. But we have to have the Pope realize that Jesus set up a hierarchical church, and he has to demand the bishops do this. I just don't know how we're going to get through
We do it this way, that the laity must begin the first 5 Saturdays, the devotion to the Immaculate Heart. We need to pray the Rosary. That's our part. Some people, and I'm hoping the Fatima Center will take the lead. In We know that Putin has call it a devotion to Our Lady of Fatima. The Fatima Center has been vocal about that. We really have to offer up fast reparations so that in this really dangerous time in our world, where we know the prophecies of what may happen to Europe, Russia will spread its errors. So it's our job, I guess, as laity to do what we can. Those of us who would be in a position to continue to demand the consecration of Russia. That's the only thing he should be doing, is the consecration of Russia, with all the bishops and, in communion with the Catholic faithful. And so we know that there are miracles that can happen. We know Our Lady will respond to prayer. And that's why I just love the Fatima Center, because you have been there from the very beginning, carrying this message, which right now in the time we live is the most critical message. It's, frankly, it's the only message Donald Trump and world leaders should hear. So I have great hope that Catholics and people around the world, as much as we can get the Fatima message out and the consecration, obviously the consecration hasn't happened, as Our Lady asked, why these men can't obey the Blessed Mother, the Mother of God. Well, I have my theories, but we've got to do this. This is like game on, folks. This is, everybody needs to, pray for the Catholic imagination to work on the Pope and on the bishops, and to hound your bishops about this. Now all you have to do is send an email to them. Just hound them about the consecration. There's lots of things that we can do spiritually, and I think physically, emotionally, talking about that, that will bring it about. And the more we kind of do those things, Our Lady will help us to make that happen.
Thank you for that, because I think that we should offer you a job at the Fatima Center, because I think that you expressed that beautifully. It was excellent. And it's
No,
true.
Father
Our
Gruner,
late,
I'm telling you, Father Gruner and the suffering and persecution that he underwent as a result of just trying to get them to believe the Fatima message and follow through. Everybody should read the Fatima Priest. You'll have such an appreciation of this wonderful, good, and holy priest, and I think be inspired to do your own thing. Whether it's talking to your prayer groups, whether it's talking to your parish priest, whether it's bringing in speakers, and spread the word.
Yeah, that's very true. And Father Gruner said that himself. He would say, if people could just tell,
Yes.
a few people that they know, and then they can tell a few people that they know, and so on and so on. There used to be a commercial like that, actually.
That's right.
But nevertheless, it is true. And we do know that Our Lady of Fatima told Sister Lucy that when a sufficient number of people are living the Fatima message, that is when the Pope will be given the grace to do the consecration properly. So even though the times are dire, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, pray the rosary.
Exactly. So even though the times are dire, I don't want people to be scandalized and say, oh, well, all is lost. The church has been infiltrated, so there's nothing I can do. There is a lot you can do. Exactly what Liz said. Okay. We need to be praying the rosary every day. We need to be praying for the Pope and sacrificing for the Pope that he will do this. We need to be doing those 5 first Saturdays of reparation over and over if you can, because reparation for all of these sins is crucial. We need to wear the brown scapular. We need to, pray and sacrifice for sinners. We need to do everything that Our Lady of Fatima has asked us to do in order to bring about this miraculous transformation so that the Pope will actually obey Our Lady. So, Liz, it was a pleasure having you on here today. I'm just so thrilled that you are such a great advocate, not only for children. We didn't get into that too much today for time reasons, but you're such an advocate for children. You're such a great Catholic. You know exactly what's important. And hopefully, President Trump or any other world leaders, Vladimir Putin, will realize that the consecration is the key to solving this problem in the church and the world. So thank you so much.
Thank you, and thank you for all you do for the Fatima Center. It's just absolutely the most important work out there.
Thank you so much. And please remember, everybody, to like this video, to subscribe to our channel, and to share the video with others so that more people will understand the crisis in the church and the message of Fatima, which is the only solution for the problems of our times. God bless you, everyone. Our Lady of Fatima,
pray for us.